The group of people from Trin Sha ran in terror following the platoon. They were clueless about what to do, having just come from a civilized, peaceful society, only to suddenly find themselves experiencing events like those in a fantasy tale. At first, they indeed believed it was all just a dream, with Trin Sha even finding some dark amusement in it. His life was mundane, and he was searching for excitement from one-night stands to drug use to fighting just to escape the monotonous cycle of going to work, coming home, eating, and then defecating. He did not want such a world. He was seeking a world filled with danger and excitement, and now such a world was unfolding before him. Initially, he felt thrilled, not only able to experience countless horror films, but also able to use reward points for self-enhancement. Just the first films he had watched, already familiar to him, ensured he would not die. Later, as he grew stronger, the characters in the films could no longer touch him. Then, he could freely seek thrills, and even return to reality when bored. A true paradise. But now, when two explosions sounded in his ears, like a hammer shattering his dream, there was no paradise. This place was not heaven, but hell, and he was just a tiny worm in the hands of the gods, his life worth no more than 2 explosions. No, he did not want to die. He could not die. The mercenaries and characters did not hear the explosions. They didn't even know 2 people were missing. When they reached the end of the staircase, one mercenary said, "Boss, the Red Queen has noticed us." Alice asked curiously, "Who is Red Queen?" Anderson glanced at her and said, "It's the most advanced system nationwide, controlling the hive, the central computer here." The mercenaries continued down the stairs, and Truong Kiet looked back at the panting group of Trin Sha, laughed heartily, and said, "Keep it up. Being alive is already thanking God. Honestly, you guys are very lucky. This movie is very safe. It's one of the few that can be resolved with guns. Just endure. Surviving this movie will earn you 1,000 points to physically enhance yourselves." As they went deeper inside, numerous laboratories lined both sides of the corridor, all flooded, with the horrifyingly pale bodies of researchers floating inside. Trin Sha knew they were all infected with the virus, and as soon as the computer was shut down, they would come back to life, seeking human flesh. "Damn it!" one mercenary halted. "To get to the control room, we must pass through these labs, but they're all flooded. I don't think we can get through." Matt nodded, then turned back and said, "Ryan, JD, see if there's a way to drain the water." The long-haired female mercenary turned out to be a man named Ryan, who, along with JD, carried guns deep inside. Matt looked into the water-filled labs and said, "Frank, Truong Kiet, see if there's another route to get to where Red Queen is?" Frank picked up his gun and followed Ryan. Truong Kiet dismissively waved at the group of Trin Sha and followed along. The 4 of them had gone far when Sion suddenly asked, "What's going on here? Why do these labs look like—" "Flooded from the inside." Matt looked at everyone and replied, "About 5 hours ago, the Red Queen suddenly cut off communication, locked all the doors, disabled the elevators, and used the defense system to release toxic gas, fluting everything to kill all the people here." Matt paused, then continued. "When the company discovered what was happening here, they dispatched our squad to shut down the computer system. That's our mission." The characters in the movie were astonished. Alice clenched her teeth and said, "Why would it do that? Isn't it just an AI system?" Matt shook his head and replied, "I don't know. It might be due to external influences, a computer virus, or sabotage." Matt was still speaking when a pale corpse floated up behind the glass wall behind Mad, startling him, making him jump aside. Everyone was startled, looking in that direction. While Matt's men seemed unnerved, they quickly regained their composure. Only Trin Sha and his group were so scared that they felt their limbs go cold. Watching a movie is one thing, but seeing everything up close was terrifying beyond words. As Trin Sha was dazedly looking at the corpse, suddenly a hand patted his shoulder. At that moment, any action could have scared someone to death. Trin Sha jumped back several meters, turning around only to realize it was a girl wearing glasses smiling at him. "Hey, I think we should introduce ourselves. We're about to live or die together," the girl with glasses said smilingly. The 3 men unanimously agreed. The girl with glasses introduced herself. "My name is Chiem Lam, Chiem of Chiem Tien Hu, a character in the Demon's Warding District. Lam of Sanfong V Lam, the Green of the Mountains. Hey, sounds like a boy's name, doesn't it? I'm a writer, upset because I'm out of inspiration and the desire to write. Then I came to this world full of inspiration. Seems like karma or something." Trin Sha smiled amiably. I am Trin Sha, Trin of Trin Tan Kong, king of Dien Bien district in Taiwan. Sha from Na Sha, commonly called Neja in Vietnam, previously the chief office of the company. Before coming here, I always lamented how mundane life was, feeling like it was slowly corroding away, looking for excitement, but it seems the excitement here might be a bit too much. Chim Lam chuckled and shook hands with Trin Sha, saying, "Soulmates. I think so too." The middle-aged, gentle man said, "I'm Mu Kwong. Mu from planning, Kwong from strength. Well, I don't compare to people with culture. I'm a long-haul truck driver, bored with a fierce wife and spoiled kids, ended up here playing games online with friends." Finally, the unremarkable young man spoke. "I'm Li Tiu Eng-hee, a 12th grader, senior year in the Chinese system. I used to complain a lot, but it seems not too bad here. As Truong Kiet said, as long as we don't die, we'll turn into superheroes, keeping our powers when we return. I was often bullied at school. If I make it back, I'll kill all those bastards." A vicious expression appeared on Li Tio Nghee's face. The other three looked at each other, recognizing the deep disillusionment with society in the young man, a common bond among them. Just then, Truong Kiet and a mercenary walked past them. Truong Kiet casually slapped Chiem Lam's buttocks loudly. She was startled and yelped. Truong Kiet laughed heartily and moved towards Matt. "Boss, we've found another route to the control room, but it will take a bit longer," Frank said. "We head back this way, through Dining Hall B, straight to the place, but it will take twice as long." At that moment, the two scouts also returned, Ryan reported. "This way is no longer viable. The whole floor is flooded, sir." "All right. We'll take the second route. We don't have much time. Everyone hurry up." Reluctantly, the group from Trin Sha had no choice but to follow the others. Fortunately, they didn't have to run this time. Before long, they arrived in front of an iron door, which the mercenaries expertly decoded to reveal a room with several crystal tanks inside. These tanks, each a few cubic meters in volume, emitted a chilly mist, and anyone familiar with the movie knew that these tanks nurtured liquors in a frozen state. Once the computer was turned off, they would turn into monsters far more powerful than zombies. A mercenary spoke up. "This is Dining Hall B, marked on the map." Anderson stepped closer to examine the map. Mad whispered, "There's definitely a secret here that the company doesn't want outsiders to know." Matt glanced over, then spoke to the person next to him. "Ryan, JD, Truong Kiet, stay here to guard the prisoners, secure the door, the rest follow me." Just then, the nurse mercenary spoke. "Sir, this place wasn't exposed to the gas. No detoxification needed. It looks like the defensive system here has lost control." Matt nodded and commanded, "Good. JD, Ryan, Truong Kiet. There might still be survivors here. Check it out, but keep an eye on the prisoners and secure the exit." All three nodded. Truong Kiet just smirked and lit a cigarette. Anyone watching the film would know there are no survivors here, only countless zombies. Chiem Lam approached Truong Kiet and asked softly, "I want to know one thing. Can we change the plot?" Truong Kiet nodded. "Continue. What else do you want to know?" Chiem Lam's laugh tinkled like silver clinking. "We could use plastic explosives to wipe out all the liquors here. We could earn a few thousand reward points." Truong Kiet burst into laughter. "You're not wrong. Killing all these liquors could indeed earn a few thousand points, but I have two questions for you. First, will they give us time to set the explosives?" Truong Kiet pointed towards the mercenaries, continuing, "They don't know what's inside, don't know what will happen when the computer is turned off, seeing us doing things they don't understand. The most likely scenario is they will shoot us first, potentially releasing the liquors early. The main god will not stand idly by and let us change the plot. It could lead to many surprises or increase the difficulty. You understand?" After answering his own question, Truong Kiet continued. "The second question, according to you, what exactly are we relying on to survive in these horror films?" Chiem Lam paused, stroking her forehead, murmuring, "Strength, no. Luck, no. Perhaps knowing the plot thoroughly." Truong Kiet laughed and said, "Exactly. Correct answer. Therefore, before I am certain about the consequences, I will not change the plot. If anyone tries to alter it on their own and endangers everyone, I won't hesitate to send them to hell." While saying this, Truong Kiet gave Trin Sha, who was standing beside him, a very uncomfortable look, full of pity, as if looking at a dead man. Just then, Matt spoke up. "All right, everyone follow me. Let's get moving." Truong Kiet moved with the group, glancing around as if searching for something. The mercenaries didn't speak. Only the group from Trin Sha knew that because Truong Kiet couldn't stray more than 100 meters from Matt. He had to follow along. As they moved along, they passed several doors, including the control room. But now the Red Queen was out of control, making the control room completely useless. Among the mercenaries, Frank was the best with computers. He opened up 3 laptops and connected them to the sealed server room door. To Trin Sha's eyes, Frank was absolutely a computer expert, his fingers constantly tapping away at the keyboard, attempting to break the encryption. An impatient female soldier asked, "Why is it taking so long?" Frank didn't even turn to reply. The Red Queen has a very comprehensive defense system. If it were easy to break into, no one would use it as the central computer. Just then, the door slowly began to open. Matt nodded and said, "Pack up the gear." Turning back to Trin Sha and others, he continued, "You guys stay here." Behind the large door was a corridor about 10 meters long, with walls of crystal, entirely different from the steel doors at each end. Matt Anderson cautiously entered the corridor, tiptoeing very lightly, but even as the corridor lit up brightly, he was still startled. A sudden feeling that would have paralyzed the limbs of ordinary people. Frank shouted from behind, "Don't worry, it's just automatic sensor lights, nothing else." Obviously, it's a defense system. Automatic sensor my ass, thought Trin Sha, just about to speak when a small hand stopped him. Chiem Lam, who had approached silently, held his hand and shook her head. Matt by then had set up a remote control system that looked like a mobile phone, just needing to be attached to a touchscreen. Frank input some commands into the computer, a soft sound rang out, and the server room door gradually opened. Matt Anderson sighed in relief and called from the corridor, "Bring that here." "What's that? What's it for?" Alice asked innocently. "It's a system to shut down Red Queen. It can emit a strong magnetic field that causes the computer to malfunction and automatically reset," Frank replied, being the closest. At that moment, the soldier carrying the device entered the corridor. Trin Sha couldn't help but exclaim, "Hold on. Doesn't anyone feel this is odd? This computer system seems too useless, letting you reset it so easily. There must be something unusual about this corridor." All the mercenaries stopped, giving him a strange look. Chiem Lam sighed, let go of Trin Sha's hand, and stood aside with Alice. Matt walked out from the corridor, silently observing Trin Sha. Then after a long moment, he pointed to Trin Sha and Mu Kuang and said, "Fine. You two come with us." Trin Sha and Mu Kuang instantly felt a chill. Everyone who had watched the movie knew this corridor was a deadly trap. Even the highly skilled team captain had died there, gruesomely sliced into small pieces by a laser. Now, Trin Sha understood why Truong Kiet looked at him that way. Indeed, he had impulsively wanted to change the plot. The main god had not stood by idly, but had increased the difficulty to this deadly level, drawing him into this corridor of death. Suddenly, Mu Kuang screamed, holding his head, "I don't want to die!" and turned to run back. Trin Sha hadn't recovered when the mercenaries immediately turned their guns on Mu Kuang, shooting him into a bloody mess, falling dead on the spot. With a gag, Trin Sha and Li Tiu Ngyi simultaneously vomited. Witnessing a man brutally murdered right before their eyes was terribly unsettling. Especially for Trin Sha, Mu Kuang could be said to have died because of his meddling. Matt Anderson coldly looked at Trin Sha and said, "From the beginning I suspected you guys. You're registered on the list but don't look like guards at all. All right, Trin Sha, come with us." Trin Sha felt as if he was soaked in icy water. Just done vomiting, his stomach still uncomfortable, when Matt grabbed him along with the other soldiers into the corridor. As they entered the corridor, it immediately closed at both ends like in the movie. The mercenaries instantly went on high alert, aiming their guns around. Matt released Trin Sha, calling over the radio, "Frank, what the hell is going on? It's a kind of passive defense setup. Once too many people enter, it automatically seals both ends." Frank replied urgently, "Disable it." "I'm trying here," Frank responded, sweating and stammering. Matt Anderson reluctantly ordered his subordinates, "Stand still, don't move." Trin Sha, hearing that, went completely cold, knowing that the drama was about to begin and he was one of its participants. And sure enough, lights on the walls dimmed, and a line of light formed, shooting towards the mercenaries and Trin Sha. Matt reacted fastest, pulling the two beside him down. Trin Sha, alert from the beginning, dove to the ground as the laser beam just grazed his shoulder, searingly hot. His mind went blank. "Nurse! Nurse!" Matt's loud call snapped Trin Sha out of his daze. Turning back, The head of the female nurse soldier was slowly moving, falling with a thud and rolling to his feet, her eyes bulging as if cursing, as if mocking. "No, I don't want to die." Trin Sha began to scream crazily, but oddly. The more he screamed, the calmer he became, beginning to remember every detail of the movie about this corridor of death. Matt supported a soldier whose arm had been sliced off, and just then another shouted, "Boss, here comes another one!" Trin Sha remembered that this time the beam would start at shin level. After slicing through the first person, it would shoot up, dismembering the second. He didn't know if the sequence would change. He could only choose to trust his memory. He had only one choice. A wrong choice would mean immediate death. The beam started moving towards the four people. The first soldier, lying on the ground, unable to move, was killed immediately. The other two retreating towards Trin Sha. He stared intently at every movement of the two. Suddenly, everything seemed to happen in extreme slow motion. Breaking mental limits, reward 500 points, mental strength increased by 20 points, neural reaction increased by 30 points. A cold, impassive yet solemn voice sounded in Trin Sha's ear. But he heard nothing. His eyes fixed on the soldier just as the soldier jumped up. He lay down, the laser beam skimming over him, hot as a scythe of death. At that moment, Trin Sha believed Truong Kiet's words. They had not just entered this game in spirit, this game was of the gods or demons. Here, they would die for real. Just as the beam was about to split the soldier in half, Trin Sha sprang up. He turned back and saw Chiem Lam's tear-streaked face on the glass window of the steel door. He managed a slight smile, then grabbed Matt, pressing him tightly against the doorframe. He could only hope the sequence didn't change. The beam, turned into a grid, would shred anyone. There was no way to dodge, only by pressing close to the door, hoping that in the last moment Frank would turn it off. Matt struggled violently, yelling, "Let me go, or we'll be cut in half. Let go of me." Trin Sha clung to Matt's shirt and shouted, "Trust me, this time we can't dodge it. We can only hope by sticking here. Trust me." The third beam formed, rushing towards them, positioned to slice across their waists. Matt tried to lie down. Trin Sha held on tight to Matt's shirt, his eyes closed, muttering, "Survive! Must survive! No matter what, I want to keep living!" Perhaps the gods opened their eyes. Perhaps Trin Sha's prayers were effective. The beam, nearing the two, faded into a grid just millimeters away, a hot blast hitting their faces. That moment, neither dared to believe they were still alive. Trin Sha opened his eyes, not seeing the laser grid disappear. But he knew he had succeeded. Everything happened just as in the movie, and finally, he had escaped from the grip of death. In his 20-something years of life, he had never come so close to death, as it had just grazed by him. What was that? Just as Trin Sha was congratulating himself on his luck, suddenly a silver-white orb emerged from Matt, flying towards him and merging into his hand, creating an extremely pleasant sensation. Completed a level B detail, reward 5,000 points. The solemn, steady voice echoed again, and it was then Trin Sha remembered he had just earned 500 points, with 20 for mental strength and 30 for neural reflexes, totaling about 1,000 points, which was the basic reward. Now, being rewarded an additional 5,000 points felt like a gift from heaven, leaving him dazed, not sure if it was for surviving or for the reward. As the door opened, he was still stunned there. Li Tionanki turned towards him, slapping him hard while exclaiming, "Big brother, you're amazing! To survive a situation like that!" Trin Sha was jolted awake by the slap. He gave a wry smile and shook his head, unsure of what else to say. Having gone through a life-and-death experience, it was too much of a thrill for someone from a normal society. Chiem Lam also came over and said, "Serves you right. People kept saying not to try to change the movie's details, but you wouldn't listen. Truong Kiet was right. You can't always be lucky. If you're not familiar with the plot, it's very dangerous. None of us want to die here." Trin Sha shook his head, uncertain whether to speak about the reward. What does a level B detail mean? Is it because of changing the plot, saving someone who was supposed to die, or surviving a dangerous situation? He didn't know. Just now, it was indeed too dangerous. He almost died, and Mu Kuong died because of him. If he continued to change the plot, there was a chance they all might die here, including him, Chiem, Li, and all the characters in the movie. In these horror films, no one is safe. They are all just pitiful worms, writhing, struggling to live.